So, welcome back to Mixed Media. We just had a really great time with a ton of people. I think we had like maybe 20 unique viewers or something like that, popping in and out of the stream. Awesome to see people interacting in the comments and chat and all that kind of stuff. Some great works by some up-and-coming people that I hope feel encouraged, and hopefully what we say accelerates people's movements forward and all that kind of stuff. But now we got to do round two. And round two is gonna go around again with film, music and gaming respectively, and we're going to review Reddit, review what you guys post online to share with other people. And shout out to you guys for being brave enough to go ahead and do that and share what you've done. Gaming time.
All right, so the first tree. All right, so it's worth noting I did not get these games from Reddit. Not gonna lie, I didn't realize I was supposed to. But yeah, so these are just two games that I decided to play. I had them. I hadn't played them yet. Decided to play them. Yeah. So the first one I'll be reviewing is The First Tree. All right, The First Tree. All right. Here's a little bit of an overview about the game. So I should say also both of these games, they're created by indie development studios. Both of them created by one person, more or less, minus the music for both of them, I believe. And these are indie games, but they're definitely accomplished indie games. I chose them because they are of like some, historical significance, I guess, in that this is potentially the sort of breakthrough games for each company's endeavors. The first one's called The First Tree. So it's a story-driven game about a man who is telling his wife about a dream that included a fox trying to find her two children. And while he's doing this, he's sort of talking about the death of his dad and how the dream may relate to this. And this game was created by the developer as a sort of emotional release for the death of his dad. So the developer his name is David Whale. He doesn't have that's the name he goes by. He doesn't have a development studio. He does this because his games are all fairly personal and he wants it to be his name, not a company entity. This is the second game he ever released. The first one sort of went under the radar. Nothing really big came of it. This one sold over 100,000 copies, so that's pretty good. I played for about a little under 2 hours, and the game was meant to be a 2-hour game, but I probably played a bit slow because I was also writing down a lot of notes in the process. So let's get into the game. So first, of course, the first thing, on the screen here is when I start a game, the first thing I always do is I check the settings, right? Because it's sort of it's always an indicator of what's to come. The quality of the settings menu I found, and also it's actually just useful to change some settings. So
that's pretty funny.
Well, I mean, this is perhaps a bad omen, but as you can see on the screen, we have the settings menu using Unity default images for the button and the drop-down menus. And the resolution drop down I clicked, and as you can see, it's glitched out. It just has one resolution listed over and over and over again. So that scared me a lot. And I was confused. I was like, this game sold 100,000 copies. That's interesting. That it doesn't even have a functional settings menu. And the settings aren't too in detail. But so moving on. You can go to the next image whenever you can. Everything. The first impressions that I had of the game were from an audio-visual sense, right? When you drop from the game, you don't know what the game mechanics are yet. I didn't really know anything about the game going in, so it's just, what do you see? The first thing I noticed was the fox was floating a little bit. He's not quite on the ground. I also noticed that the game had a very inconsistent art style. So it's hard to see from this sort of image, but the fox is the only cel-shaded thing in the game. Everything else in the world uses a semi-realistic shader in terms of shadows, I guess, and lighting. I guess that's what all shader is, but yeah, fox is the only cel-shaded thing. I just thought, why? I thought maybe to give contrast to the fox as the as that is the character you're playing as, this fox that the narrator dreamt of. But nonetheless, I continued on, and this image is me looking into the distance. And I noticed this is using the Unity engine's terrain generator, right? And it's very obvious. It's probably not obvious from a non-game developer's perspective, but from my perspective, it's very clear how they made this, and the sort of it's sort of like I can see the brushstrokes, right? So it's like looking at a photorealistic painting, and you just see like one brushstroke in the middle of the whole thing, and it sort of ruins the effect. So that's what I just wanted to capture there. So yeah, I noticed the overall sort of audio quality was low, but that's okay, right? It's an indie game, and it's not expected to look particularly great, and so I moved on. You can go to the next image whenever. So let's talk about what the gameplay actually is, right? Essentially, as I said before, it's about a guy who's telling a story of a dream of this fox, right? And he's relating to the death of his dad. So this is mostly an exploration game, is how the creator of the game calls it. It's all about it's an open world, right? Relatively small, but it's about going around, and you don't really have a sort of purpose as to what you're doing. You're going around and you're finding these little fragments of this world and this guy's dream, and you're essentially just trying to getting inside this guy's head and trying to understand what's going on, right? So in this particular screenshot, you have this bench, right? This oversized bench. There are these random oversized objects scattered on the map that have this like frozen-like shader to show that they're like a dream item, I guess. It's something from the man's real life that appears in the game. At first I thought, oh, this is an interesting shader or a texture on it, right? Because it's highly detailed, whereas the rest of the game is entirely flat. And I was scared that it was a inconsistency in the art direction, but I believe this was intentional to draw upon the fact that these are special objects and that they should be to draw your attention to them. And as you can see on the top, I have there's a little bar there, right? And that's because I noticed in the settings there was a setting called commentary mode. I didn't know what that was. And if you are going to play this game, I highly suggest you turn that on, because what it is around the map, there are certain locations that have these beams that like come up from them. And if you walk on it, it's the developer talking to you, and he's going through like how he made the game as you're doing this. And as for why I suggest you do it, is because I find the game sort of very slow otherwise. And as a game developer, obviously, it's very interesting, but it also makes it a lot more personal. The reason being is that the story of the dad is much of it's true, because it's akin to the dad of the actual developer. So you're hearing him talk about it, and you're getting more information about it in a sort of way. It's sort of adding on to the story in a way that I don't think he really intended. And also because the map is large enough where there's a lot of places to go, but there are not enough things to explore. So you end up just walking around a lot, just looking for the next thing, and you just can't find it for a long time, and that really ruins the pace of the game. So having this commentary mode on creates these big beacons where you need to go, essentially, and it helps out a lot. There's not enough interesting stuff to warrant just roaming around and hoping you find something interesting. So yeah, it took me a while to realize that the game is pathless. I was following this path, and it just didn't lead to anywhere. And I realized, oh yeah, this is you're not meant to go in one direction. You go anywhere you want. So what are the rule sets of this game, right? So there's this sort of, because currently as we have is almost like a walkthrough of a story, almost, right? Like an animated story. But the engaging part of the game is supposed to come from these jumping puzzles, right? There are these areas around the map where you need to get from point A to point B, but in order to do so, you need to pass some supposedly difficult jumping tricks, I guess, to get from point A to point B. I found these pretty useless. There are a few reasons, and I think it really all just comes down to the fact that David Whale is a storyteller, not a level designer. So for one, like the layout of the map is such that if you miss a jump, it really sucks. You really have to walk a long way back to get to the beginning where you need to do the jump over again. And there's no like reset level button. It doesn't work like that. You actually have to go and walk back. And in one of the commentary mode sections, he says that the reason why he added them was to keep the game interesting, which makes me wonder if the core part of your game, that means the core part of your game is these stories, right? And shouldn't that have been interesting enough? Why did you have to add something to make the game more interesting? It really ends up making it such that both sides of the thing are sort of the story part and the jumping part are both almost seem like they're like neglected because he didn't have as much time to focus on just the one thing. And the jumping is really it wasn't worth it. It's definitely the worst of the two things. It was very another part of the level design that's very shoddy was a part where the game tries to teach you a new mechanic. So you walk to this particularly difficult jump where you have to jump fairly high to make the jump. And the game shows you a little butterfly icon, right? It says, you can go to the next image, by the way. Butterfly icon has a plus sign, and it's like plus jump, right? So like butterfly plus jump. What does that mean? I don't know. It didn't have text. It was just these images that were not very descriptive. So I was looking around for butterflies, and I didn't see any. And I was kind of confused. I just attributed that to not understanding what I was supposed to do and just me being dumb. So I managed to make the jump anyways, and later the butterfly showed up. I understood the mechanic. I really wonder why the tutorial for the mechanic was not where the mechanic was showed off first. It was like a decent bit beforehand. The butterfly mechanic is just a mechanic where there are butterflies, you can like walk into them and they'll follow you, and then you can jump higher from there. And that helps you do certain jumping tricks. One of the things he also says is that it made it so that the players, he made the butterfly mechanic so that jumping could be easier in certain portions of the game, which would allow players to focus on the world and the story. But I think the whole thing on the whole just distracts from the story. It's like an entirely new thing that is not necessary at all. And for a sort of a good example of how that affected me was while he was explaining how he was trying to make the butterfly mechanic so it didn't distract the player, I had to listen to it 3 times because I was in the middle of trying to jump and failing over and over again, and I couldn't remember what he was saying because I was only focusing on making the jump. I figured maybe what he was saying had to do with the butterfly mechanic, and it did, but it didn't tell me like how it worked. The game is entirely non-linear. You can go wherever you want, and where in the certain landmarks is where the story progresses, where the narrator speaks to his wife and tells her the story of the dream. The problem is that it lets you go non-linearly, but that doesn't mean the story is non-linear. So, for example, let's say you have 3 points on this map where you have a dialogue that will occur if you go there, right? Let's say the story is meant to go from A, B to C, but you go from A and you go to C because there's nothing stopping you, and maybe it's even closer, right? That's bad because you're missing the context of point B, and you don't know what they're referring to in point C. That happened to me once. I thought the entire thing was nonlinear. The first level, at least, everything was actually nonlinear, I think, for the most part. There were some things at the start that you had to get to, but they were very clearly intentionally put in front of you, and you couldn't really pass them without noticing them, such that you would follow that linearly. The rest of it was fairly nonlinear, but I got to a point where I was listening to the story and I just didn't get what he was saying. I was like, "What are you referring to?" And it turned out that I just missed a point, and there was nothing I can do to get back. There are no waypoints at some games have like waypoints at sections where story events happen. This game doesn't have that. I have to actually go around and find the missing story bit. And what I also noticed as far as the story goes is that the fox sort of becomes irrelevant at some point, right? As I said before, the fox is the main character of this man's dream, right? And so you would think like he's stepping through this dream as a fox, and that is sort of how it starts. But very early on into the game, the fox is like just never mentioned again. I'm just like a means to get from one place to another in order to progress the story that doesn't have anything to do with the fox anymore or anything to do with the dream. It's entirely talking about what happened in real life. It feels like the whole dream idea was just useless at some point. I feel like it shouldn't have been a thing to begin with. I feel like it'd be more interesting if it was just ambiguous. Why you're a fox, right? It's very strange. And so I have sort of 2 instances of the level design failing me. So aside from what I've said already, so there's this plateau, right? I couldn't figure out how to get on it, right? And there were these 2 butterfly sections where you can get butterflies in order to jump higher, and I figured maybe I need to get both of these. Maybe you jump higher, right? It didn't tell me that, but you can kind of put 2 plus 2 together and figure if you have more butterflies, you jump higher. So I tried that; it didn't work, and I was very confused, and I was so unable to figure it out because the game gives you no guidance pretty much as to how you solve anything. That it was so unintuitive that I managed to get up with an exploit. I found out how to exploit the game faster than I could figure out how to solve it correctly. It's possible and from there I figured out it's possible to jump up any surface really as high as you want to using this exploit. It kind of ruined the game for me because the challenge is no longer there, although I just chose not to use it ever again. And the second area where level design has failed me was the cliff section. So about this time I confirmed that multiple butterflies do make you jump higher. And when I did, and I got to this cliff, I realized I had not collected any butterflies for this cliff. So I had to go back throughout the entire level and collect like all these butterflies in order to make this jump. This is, pretty poor level design, where the cliff was just needlessly far from everything else. There's no reason why it couldn't be closer. There's no like story reason or anything. Like it would have looked just fine if we were closer. And so my final thoughts is that David Whale is not a game designer, but rather he's a storyteller. And I feel like he would perhaps be better suited for a purely just interactive adventure, right? So it feels like he had the right idea starting out, but it sort of strayed away. In total, I played for almost 2 hours, as I said before, but I barely scratched the surface of the story. I could never get very far because I was just doing other things the entire time, walking from point A to point B to do whatever it was that was just unimportant to anything else. Perhaps like an animated short film or like an interactive visual novel. That would have been something that would be more up David's alley, I think. And I think focus is put into the wrong things. So I think you can get rid of a lot of the detail in the art that I guess you could see in the image before, where sort of the wall. Actually, can you put up the prior image? The whole thing is very very flat, right? And that's just part of the style. But then you have this highly detailed wall, which is strange. And it's like, but why? Why out of everything, like this? It wasn't like this in the prior levels. It's just this wall is just randomly highly detailed. It's somewhat unsettling, I guess, to see that in the world. So yeah, I think there was too much focus put into random art details when it should have been kept simple, and too much focus is put on the annoying jumping bits. And I think creating a denser story would be a better sort of thing to do. I think on the whole, the purpose of the game, it probably served its purpose, right? The purpose was to let this guy release his feelings about his father's death. Of course, I can't really judge that. I can't tell you whether he did or not, but I'm going to assume he did it, right? I would say it's an incredible success for him to create such a thing, but for the average consumer looking to buy this game, I think it is perhaps not the greatest idea, I guess. It doesn't fulfill the consumer's needs, even though it fulfills the developer's needs. And I think that's pretty much it. If you want to play the game, he has a website, and you can find it on literally every platform available: Steam, Epic Games. You can find it on the Switch Store, PS4. It's on the last gen consoles. I don't know if it's on current gen consoles. And that's it.
Something about that reminded me a little bit of Knight of Cups. Like, it's a really personal story that is being given to us in this kind of format that doesn't really match like how we should approach someone else's personal story.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. That's a pretty good comparison. And that's fine from the artist's perspective if that's all they want to achieve. You can make stuff for yourself. It's just if your goal was to communicate something to other people, then that's a little different,
Something I forgot to mention actually is that it's worth noting the game was created in 18 months, and the guy had a full-time job, so that's pretty incredible. Doing it all himself pretty much, except the music, which was created by Josh Kramer, I believe his name is. He licenses out music, and yeah.
Pretty cool, yeah. Yeah, so that's it, right, for that one?
Sure. All right, you can put up the image, the first image of this next game.
All right. Let me see. We're going to get this right. There we go.
You good now? Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so this second game I chose is called The Spectrum Retreat. It's a game created by Dan Smith Studios, which is also a one-person studio published by Ripstone Games, released in 2018 and took 5 years to develop, which is a very different story than the other game. And the developer was 15 years old when he started, which means he was 20 when it ended, which is pretty crazy. It's quite the change in life from when you started that and from when you ended it. Played about 2 hours of this game as well. The game is also about 2 hours, but keep in mind that I'm playing slowly because I also have to review it and write things down. So analyze the options menu again. Options menu was very limited, I must say. Couldn't rebind keys. and the image quality was a bit fuzzy, and that got me kind of scared. But upon entering the game, the art direction is actually just beautiful. It's really nice compared to what I was expecting. Everything is consistent for the most part. I'll get to when it's not consistent, but for the most part, everything is consistent. Everything looks nice. I don't know if he licensed out the not
Contracted?
Contracted out. That's what I'm looking for. Contracted out the 3D models, because I'm like, these are fairly detailed for a single person game. To have to do all that, but then again, it did take 5 years, so maybe that's where all the time went. If so, it's very impressive. Do multi-skilled like that. Yeah, there was a bit of weirdness with the graphics sometimes. For example, the game is a sort of mind-bending game, right? So there are certain tricks it tries to pull off, like creating infinite hallways, for example. Well, it's like a hallway that loops around where it probably shouldn't, I guess. It is one example. And the way it does it is fairly simple. All it does is the hallway, in engine, since most engines are like use Euclidean space, then you can't actually have like a infinite hallway or any sort of thing that doesn't, follow the normal rules of the universe, right? So in order to go around this, he just teleports the player when they're at the end of where they should be. That he teleports them to the start, if that makes sense. The problem is that there's a bit of a flickering in the lighting. You can tell it that you're being teleported somewhere else. I'm not really sure what causes it, especially because the lighting should be baked, so because nothing moves there. So I don't. And there's no shadows, so no shadows on the character. So I don't know why it's like that. But yeah, and there's also some very shimmery screen space reflections. So there's a lot of reflective surfaces that are like slightly, like metal things are a bit reflective, and they're very shimmery, and it looks very strange. I'm not really sure why. And also, I'm going to say the game is incredibly dark at sometimes. The game has no slider for brightness or anything like that. So, a monitor at a standard setting it's fairly dark at certain times. Even then, I have to crank up the brightness to see certain things better. It's not unplayable, but it's worth considering people playing on monitors that can't get to a certain brightness for whatever reason, especially if you're in an area where behind you is lit a lot. Your screen's going to be harder to see unless you crank up the brightness of it. So yeah. So in terms of the gameplay loop is fairly simple. There are sort of two sections to it. So the first section is a sort of story section, right? So you're in this hotel. You don't know why you're there. Neither yourself as the player or the character knows why you're there. There are these robots. They're not real humans. Everyone is a robot, and the only people who are there are not other hotel residents. There are no other hotel residents, just like management and like staff. Those are the only people who are there, and then there's you. It's very spooky. You can go to the next image. The robots are very unsettling to look at. Their faces are non-existent, essentially, except their mouth, which is like flickers as they speak to you, and they never move. They'll never move ever. So the first part of the game is like going through the story, and then you go into this puzzle section and you go back to the story, and it does that over and over again. It's story, puzzle, story, puzzle. This works pretty well for engagement, because as you go into the puzzle, you're like, I really want to get to the next part of the story, and as you go into the story part, you're like, I really want to get to the next part of the puzzle. I think it's well paced like that, where you always want to keep going. So let's see. Yeah, so I don't want to spoil too much of the story, because it's sort of a mystery in a way, because why are you there, what's happening? But I'll talk about the very beginning. At the very start, you're contacted by somebody on this like phone device thing you have that, and it's telling you, I can get you out. You just have to follow my instructions, and then that's what you do. You follow the instructions. Every day you wake up, the exact same routine happens. The robots will be in the exact same place. They'll say the exact same lines to you, and that is terrifying, because I remember on the second day, I noticed everything was the same. I was like, oh, I get it. Everything is meant to be the same. And I was so scared that someone was going to say something different, and that was terrifying. It's like the weirdest feeling that I'm like, please just say the same exact thing you're going to say that you said yesterday. I don't know how to explain that. I don't know if that was intentional, but it's horrifying. And also, the game isn't really described as a horror game, but I would certainly say definitely the one emotion that's playing as fear is definitely one of the emotions that's trying to invoke. So it's very unsettling. Every sort of noise is like disturbing, especially because you're doing something that you're trying to escape, right? So the robots don't want you to escape in theory, right? So that sort of drives the unsettling factor when they're speaking to you, and you just hope they don't reference anything that happened before. So let's see my notes. And in fact, something different did happen one time, and I actually got scared. Like genuinely jumped slightly. I was like, oh, interesting. So let's talk about the puzzle part, right? Because that's the main part of the gameplay. So actually, I'll talk about that second. So I'll talk about the story part first. The way the story part works is you're in this hotel, and as I said before, you're being told instructions. It's very simple. You're told instructions on where to go. You go somewhere. You need to find a code. That's really the whole thing. You need to find some code somewhere. The person gives you instructions, gives you some hints to find the code. It's pretty self-explanatory. You go and find the code. This part is not meant to be like, challenging really or anything like that. It's more about the story and walking you through the story while you're doing this. And then once you find the code, you have to find a door to use the code on, and you go through the door. And then you go to the puzzle area. The puzzle area takes place in I guess I don't even know what it is yet in the story. I don't know where it is, but it's not the hotel, I guess. You can go to the next image, and that will show how the puzzle area looks like. So the mechanic is very simple, but it has a good amount of depth to it. So as you can see in this image here, right? The important parts to look at are on the bottom of the screen. You have that, it's sort of hard because it blends into the wall. We have the glowing cube, right? You see the glowing cube, and in front of you, you have this gridded wall you can see that you can't pass. And this is not showing well on YouTube because of compression, but you can sort of see before the white wall, there's also a red wall with dots on it. Hopefully you can see that as that's integral. So as you can see on the bottom right, you have that phone device thing I was talking about before, and it has a color ring on the outside, and that's important for the gameplay. The way it works is your device acts as a sort of a one-slot, almost inventory, if you will, a slot that you can put something in, a color specifically. So in this case, the slot has red in it. You can transfer the color red to any of these glowing cubes that aren't the same color as whatever's on the pad, right? So I could transfer the red color into the white cube, right? And upon it turning white, the color you have, the color will be transferred, right? So the red will go on the cube, and the cube's white will go onto the little device thing. And the color on your device is the important part. That determines which barriers you can walk through and which ones you can't. So, for example, as you have the red color here, you can walk through that red wall that hopefully you can see, and you can't walk through that white barrier. And so that's the entire game. The entire game is trying to get to the end, or the puzzle area, is trying to get to the end using this mechanic of swapping colors between different cubes that are scattered around the map, and trying to get through the walls, having to swap colors in order to get through. Does that make sense so far? I don't know if I explained that well.
It's a little bit confusing without seeing it in action, but...
Yeah. You can go to the next screenshot, and maybe hopefully it'll be a bit more... Yeah, okay, the walls are closer, so hopefully that'll help. In this area, you can see very clearly the red cube right on the right side, right? If I clicked on the red cube, what would happen is my device would turn red, and the cube would turn white. Does that make sense? It would just swap. Yeah. And what would happen is this white wall, once you have the red color on your device, you cannot pass white walls anywhere, but you can pass red walls. And as you can see, this screenshot is very representative of much of the gameplay, because you have this sort of series of alternating walls, so white and red, white, red. So you might be wondering, how do you get through the entire thing if you need one color to go through one, but the moment you switch colors again, you won't be able to get out, right? Because to just get a new color. So on the left and right of the walls, you'll see that there are these little holes that have cubes that you can interact with, right? And this is essentially, you need to create an alternating pattern on the outside in order to get the alternating pattern on the inside. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah, I swear the mechanic is so simple. It's so simple. It's just hard to put into words. And once you do it, it's just like, oh yeah, I get it. And so yeah, the game is essentially organizing these cubes in such a way with certain colors that you're able to get through until the end. At the very start, it's just 2 colors, but eventually it ramps up to 3 colors, and it gets a bit more complicated. And additional mechanics are added, but that is the basic thing. So I found that the pacing for the levels was quite odd. So when I got to about level 8, that's when the third color was added. And at that point, everything clicked. Like I understood the entire game because what I just explained, I wasn't thinking about it that way. The game doesn't explain it to you, really. It just says something vaguely about switching colors. And then you just have to figure it out by experimentation how this works. So I didn't, I had a grasp of it, of what was happening, but what I was thinking it wasn't exactly what was happening. It wasn't how the developer intended me to think about it, I think, right? So on level 8, there came 3 colors. And when you interact with the 3 colors, one of my misconceptions disappeared, and I understood the game entirely. And from there, it became super easy. It was challenging from before, and from there, it was just a walk in the park. And that became kind of a problem because I felt that the first 5 or so levels took ages, and then the next 10 were nothing, and within those next 10, a new mechanic was added, or 2 new mechanics were added. And sort of messed with the what's called flow in game design, right? Which is also known as like the tension over skill, or difficulty over skill graph. Is usually like a straight line, or it's generally straight. It's not supposed to be straight, but in general, it's a straight line. It kind of messed with that because I'm at a high skill level, but there's no difficulty really. My understanding of the game just increased, and then it was just so easy from there. I wish the game was harder. That's probably my biggest complaint. Aside from that, the level. I think this person is also a case of like you're a decent level designer, but like there is definitely more work to do. So first off, there are a lot of unnecessary walls. So what I mean by that is one of the most important things about level design is having the player, usually, it's not really rules, but usually what you want to happen is the player understands the level, right? They understand what they need to do, which is about how to do it, right? They understand how to get to the end, or where the end is, I should say, but how to get there is unclear. The problem is it gives you this very like non-open concept room, right? There's walls everywhere, and you can't see like 2 feet in front of you because there's a wall. You need to get around it, you need to walk around it or whatever, right? And this makes it entirely very hard to digest what you actually need to do, where the end is. And you can usually assume where the end is because it has this sort of like alternating pattern of white and red, or I guess when you get 3 colors, white, red, and yellow. But yeah, before that, it's just it's hard to tell where you need to go. And oftentimes there are cubes in places where you don't even realize they're there for a while because there's a wall in the way. It's like that wall didn't have to be there. There's no reason this wall has to be there for any purpose. These levels are entirely contrived, right? There's no story reason as to why they look like that, if you get what I'm saying. Like a hotel, for example, has to look like a hotel, right? These are very clearly just designed to be levels, right? So there's no reason to have walls there. Another problem is that it makes the game very slow, right? Because there's a lot of areas with branching paths, and all the paths are useful, so you need to go to one path, and you're like, oh, I can't do anything here unless I do something else in another path. You go to another path, it's not the right one. You go to another one, oh, it's the one I need, right? If there weren't so many walls, you'd be able to understand that this is the right path, right? And there's no sprinting in the game, and your walking is fairly slow, so it actually does take some time to actually get around. And that's one of the big complaints with the game. I try not to read too many reviews so as to not influence my judgment, but I would agree with that. I think the slowness, some people complain about the slowness in the hotel section too, but I think that actually adds to the game in that case because it's sort of like a roller coaster, right? So when you're going up a roller coaster on a chain lift, it's slow, right? And that's when the fear settles in. It's the same sort of thing where you're walking and you're just hoping nothing happens to you. You're in like the fear zone for longer, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it means you can't run past certain things too. Like you can't run past the robots. You're forced to just painfully walk towards them and hope nothing happens until something does happen. So later in the game, a new mechanic is added where since I don't want to I don't want to further make it more confusing what the mechanic is that's being played out here, but I'll just say that there's a mechanic that's added that allows you to soft lock the game. Normally, this is, well, I guess always soft locking the game is considered bad, right? I guess poor game design. You shouldn't have a level where you can soft lock.
What does that mean?
Oh, soft locking. Soft locking is I would like to say unintended, but in this case it seems intended, where you can't complete the level at all. Like the game's just over. It's not like you died, you respawn. It's like usually attributed to a bug. So I'll give you an example. let's say Minecraft, right? You're playing Minecraft, and this is an entirely contrived situation that wouldn't happen. But let's say you were above lava and you accidentally jumped into the lava, right? But right before you hit the lava, you saved the game, right? You can't live anymore, right? Because you can't like revert to a previous state where like the last state is the state at which you were going to die, 100%, right? You can't not die. This is not quite soft locking because in Minecraft you can respawn unless you're on hardcore mode. But imagine that you couldn't respawn. That is what soft locking is when the only way to progress is to restart the game essentially. Not necessarily the whole game, at least the level. Another example would be being bugged out and like glitching somewhere you shouldn't be, for example, maybe into a wall, for example. At that point, you can't move around. This is not the same as hard locking, which is when it's like you actually can't move. Like like for some reason your controls stop working, some bug in the game. Soft locking is more like you can actually play the game, but the game won't let you progress. So yeah, this game has a state in which you can soft lock, and it's fairly easy to get into. One of the mechanics adds this thing. Yeah, at the first 10 levels or something like that, you cannot soft lock the game because the mechanic is not there. Once it's there, it's very much possible. And this sort of is magnified by the fact that it's not all too clear where you need to, what the overview of the level because of all the walls, and it doesn't give you a sort of a high level view of everything. So it's very easy to soft lock yourself if you don't quite understand the puzzle. It really just has to do with not having the right amount of colors you need to complete the thing. And it's possible to lose colors with this new mechanic. So if you don't understand how many colors you need, then it's very easy to soft lock the game, and it just sucks. Especially because you don't necessarily know if you soft lock the game. You may have not needed it. You may have removed the amount of colors you need to win the game, but you hadn't realized that until you actually need that color, right? So you're progressing through the game. You soft locked it a while back. You're still going, and all of a sudden it's like, why is there not this color I need? It just turns out that you messed up a while ago. I think this is fairly simple to solve though, which is the gripe I have with it. It's not like a unavoidable issue. You can programmatically figure out if the amount of colors that you have is the amount required to solve the level. So, as a developer, you should know how many colors you need of each to solve the level. And so you can programmatically say for each level, if you don't have this many colors, then, just say you ran out of colors, that's an L, restart, essentially. But it doesn't do that. Yeah. So the final thoughts. I think the slowness critique is warranted for the puzzle section, but not warranted for the story part. I think it adds to the horror element of it, even though the game isn't marked as a horror game. I find it quite scary. So the level progression makes a lot of sense, sort of, right? So it made a lot of sense if I didn't get that massive increase in pacing. It totally killed the flow of the game. And the game wasn't all too engaging at certain times. There's so I don't know what engagement is a very specific term in game design, and it really just refers to the player wanting to play more essentially without being addicted. It's like separate, I guess, right? And I did say that as engaging in the sense that you switch between the story and the puzzle, which is you want to see what's going to happen next. You want to complete the next puzzle, but at a certain point, the slow factor of not being in the right place and having to walk around the puzzle level, that just kills the whole vibe. Just like, all right, I just don't even want to play this anymore. And this can also happen in the story section too. Even though I think the speed is fine in a way, I think it also has the problem where there's too many walls. Because if you need to find something and you're in the wrong spot, then the hotel is not so small where it's not the largest thing ever, but it's not so small where walking across it isn't a big hassle. So I think overall the game needs to guide you more as to where you need to go because of that. I think this problem of too many walls or whatever, it really doesn't have to be solved with removing the walls. You can solve it in multiple ways. You can tell the player, go this way first, please, right? In some way. You can allow the player to have a sort of like mini map of the level. That would have worked perfectly fine because there's no reason to obscure in this type of game. There's no reason to obscure what's actually there. That's pretty much all for my review.
Yeah, no, that was fun. We're definitely going to do this again. I think that's pretty much a guarantee. Maybe play with the format or whatever. Who knows what?
Yeah,
but
maybe do like one each instead of two.
Right, exactly. But it was the first time we did this. We had no idea how long it would be. But I mean, we had people stick around, which is like, I mean, you guys are awesome. And so if you want to be alerted when we come back live, hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube. Follow us if you're on Twitch. We post all this stuff literally everywhere we can. But if you like what you're seeing and you like what you're watching, hit the like button. We need nothing more than encouragement. More than anything else. We would like to, and we would love to have a community that's constantly having conversations about, any kind of art at all. Even arts that we don't, understand or, delve into. I would love to get into, painting. Yeah, I was literally gonna say that. Like, I would love to understand the minds of painters and all that kind of stuff. So hit us up on Discord. Link in the description.
If you want to talk about dancing too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Ballet is something I look at and it's like, it's so interesting, but I can't understand it other than the musical portion of it.
Yeah. So like, there you go. Like, we would love to have arts conversations. If you're, watching this or in post or listening in post or whatever, we appreciate you. And we'd love to hear what you'd want us to do in the future. If you want us to continue doing stuff like this, whatever topics you want us to cover. In fact, the best way to reach us at any given time is on Discord. There you can continue the conversation. You can tell us what you didn't like about the stuff that you saw today, or submit your own work in the future. But if you choose to support us, you like what we're doing, I would be overjoyed. I wouldn't even know what I would say if someone gave us $1 a month. I think I would cry. Just the gesture is so out of my mind. Cool. So I guess I'll say thank you so much for watching. We appreciate you stopping by, and we'll be back next week for another episode of Mixed Media Live.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Right. Thanks for watching. See you next time.